Awesome. Welcome back to the Any Given Day podcast. Today's guest, Ryan Antes. I just confirmed that I am, in fact, saying that right. And the only reason I have to figure that out is you're the first guest on that we were not friends in a previous life, even though we sort of lived just on the other side of the wall for one another.
Right, we had parallel tracks, but we didn't manage to cross in a meaningful enough way where we realized, hey, I know you.
We even damn near share a birthday, which is good for you because it means you don't have to deal with me singing you happy birthday like I did David last time. So,
well, I enjoyed your singing, and I am also a fan of the sing happy birthday to everyone, no matter what they think about how bad it sounds. So good. We'll just get to do that for each other going forward.
That's right. We're just going to stay unapologetically true to ourselves. I expect a full-on sung happy birthday voicemail in my direction come December, and you can expect the same from me.
Deal. It's already in my calendar.
You're probably also, although, I hesitate to say this because, David's pretty clean. Jason Clark, probably pretty clean. Who else have we had on? We had on James and we had on Giovanni. I'm not as certain about their history, but you're probably the only guest to spend more time in court than me. The one main difference being that your time in court, you probably make money, at least I hope so, whereas my time in court costs me a little bit of money.
It's that's always the goal. I've had my share of time in court. I've managed to get in a lot of trouble in court, but it's usually some form of contempt for being a mouthy little turd, the same way as you draw fire when you're in the Army and you do the same thing.
Well, and there's also probably some beard envy going on the part of the judge, and let's be honest, that's what's really happening.
That's got to be it. It certainly helps, and when you can grow a better beard than the man in the dress with all the power,
yep.
you tend to get in trouble.
Yeah, they're like, good sir, that is too much wisdom on your face. We're gonna need to take a recess.
You gotta clean that up, son.
You're gonna take a razor to that thing.
I did manage at one point to be asked by a judge, Mr. Antes, are you stupid or just trying to piss me off? And my response was a little from column A, a little from column B, Your Honor. Now, then we had a conversation about whether I needed to spend a night in jail to fix my attitude.
Oh, boy, here I thought he might appreciate the candor, but I guess not.
They do not. Typically, they do not, but that is criminal contempt, and you have 3 days to write an apology letter. At least that's how I spun it when the judge threatened me with a night in jail.
So what kind of law are you currently practicing?
These days, I mostly do trusts and wills. It's a great kind of opportunity to feel like I'm getting to work one-on-one and help people solve a problem that they want to solve versus one that was thrust upon them. Spent the early part of my career doing defense side civil litigation. I joked when I went to parties and didn't want to tell people I was a lawyer, I'd say I was a janitor. And they say, oh, really? And I say, yeah, I clean up people's messes for a living because that's what you do. And no one is ever terribly happy to see you. Sorry about it.
No, it's good. Let us know who wins.
That was the, we moved some stuff and then the dogs decided they needed to noise about that. So
I love it.
We've had our first dog blow up.
There you go. Everyone's getting a feel for the professionalism of the Any Given Day podcast studio right now.
Well, it's like life is what happens when we're busy making other plans.
That's exactly right. So speaking of life right now, trusts and wills, other than I guess proximity to death, that is kind of a far cry from the history that you and I know. So for the folks that don't know out there that didn't read the bio in advance, give us a little bit about, some can probably see the shirt right now with the Ranger diamond on it. So both you and I spent time in 275. What inspired your journey in that direction back in the day?
I didn't know a lot about the military when I was in high school, but I did kind of reach a point where I think a lot of us get to when we know we need to move away from home. And I had a typical Southern California kid, but I was mad at my parents and didn't want them paying for college.
Yep.
And wanted to make my own way in the world. So I went down, took the ASVAB, and after I scored pretty good, I went to all the various recruiters and I got to the Army recruiter who said, well, you've got a great score. what do you want to do? And I said, what do you have? And they said, well, you could work with computers or be in intelligence. You could be a linguist. You could be a mechanic if you're good at that sort of thing. I said, none of that. And they said, you could shoot guns and blow stuff up. And I said, that sounds great. What
Brilliant.
is that? And they said, well, that's infantry. Are you sure you got a good score? That's usually for the guys that don't score great on the
Yeah.
ASVAB.
Yeah,
I said, nope,
we can't promise the other guys will have scored as well.
no. So I said, sold. And they said, well, we'll give you an airborne contract. You ever want to jump out of an airplane? And I said, no, I'm scared of heights. And they said, it pays extra. And I said, well, you had me at extra. And they gave me a Ranger contract, and I didn't know much about it other than that I'd heard the word before. And they said, well, it's more shooting guns and blowing stuff up. And I said, that sounds great. I went to basic and AIT and then airborne school and then the Ranger Indoctrination program back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
It was an experience, right? It was one of those courses designed to weed out the people who didn't really want to be there. And being a more diminutive mammal than most of the guys I was with, I liked watching the really big tough guys that would tell me about why they were going to make it and I wasn't, but then they're crying and quitting. And I can take anything anybody can dish out. We got to the end of the program and they had us sit down in class. I don't know if they did this to you guys too, but I remember vividly the instructors gave us a little sheet and it said, rank your choices for you where you wanted to get assigned. And I went right down the list. 1st Battalion, because I'd heard it was on the beach in Savannah, Georgia. 2nd Battalion was my second choice because it was back on the West Coast. And my third choice was Fort Benning because we're stuck there. They said formation on the blacktop. We run out there and they have a burn barrel going. They drop the bag in the fire and say, do push-ups for being stupid. This is the Army. We tell you where you go.
Oh, wow. That part did not happen to us. I'm not convinced that they took our requests into consideration. That's for sure. And very similar to you, I was like, first choice, beach. Second choice, not Fort Benning. Third, it's not even a choice. It's just the only thing left being, third bat. I couldn't even point to, I couldn't even point to Seattle probably at the time on a map, to be honest, because I was a Northeast kid, sucked at geography, and I couldn't even tell you where I was going. Like, I was on the plane on the way to Washington, and I still couldn't have said, this is where this plane is headed.
I was not quite in the same boat because at least it was West Coast and I knew that there's a Washington north of us that's on the far side of the country. But that was the limit of my experience with Washington State till I got there.
Yeah, and then you just assumed all the women were obese based on what the cadre had told you.
Hey, it was a method, and I said, we're going for it anyway. At least it's not stuck here at Fort Benning.
So we both went through RIP early 2000, correct?
Yes, I think if my memory serves, I probably completed RIP in April of 2000. And you were right around then, right?
Yeah, I believe March. So I was probably the class prior, which means we probably had most of the same cadre. Honestly, I can picture a lot of them. I definitely don't know the names. That was also Black Berets, which, man, that was considerably more aggressive at the time. Loved it. Wish that was still the move. Fuck Shinseki, but because I think he was the one that did the Black Beret giveaway to the rest of the Army, right?
He did. And then I remember when he got appointed to be Secretary of the VA, like, I don't know, somewhere in the last decade. And just like, I was so mad. And it was like, oh, that's appropriate. Now that guy's in charge of the VA.
The main thing I remember is African-American dude, cadre, E6, I think. And he was a scary guy. He was fast. He was fit. And he had the funniest voice. And I remember one time he just walks outside. And he's got his coffee and he stretches. And he's like, "Good morning, Rip." And I was like, whoa. And then he's like, "I wish you would all fucking die." and then he goes, "Fucking chicken heads." And he walks back inside. And that was it.
There's the vibe back then. I don't know about your class, but mine, I ended up with a holdover week. So we have to wait to start, right? They only do the class is 3 weeks. There's a cycle ahead of us. So you just end up doing kind of bullshit details around the Ranger Regiment. And it was fine. Like, it actually was so much cooler than all the other holdover experiences I'd had in the Army at this point. So I was excited when we were going to start the program. But like day one, there were like 500 people on the blacktop. And I hope I've got this right, but Sergeant Washburn is in charge. He comes out and, listen here, you dumb shits. My name is Sergeant Washburn, and if one of you assholes calls me Sergeant Airborne, I will rip off your head and shit down your neck. I don't want to hear any of you assholes say clear either. Clear? Clear? Oh, yes, Sergeant. Yes, Sergeant. Everyone falling all over themselves. We're going to separate your shit into two piles. Shit Uncle Sam issued you, and shit Mommy gave you, and you'll get keep the shit Mommy gave you. Who wants to quit? Like 200 hands go up.
Yep. Yeah.
Hey,
I always say it's the anticipation of something hard more so than actually experiencing something hard that tends to wash people out.
you know, I think I heard James McClanahan say this on your podcast, that it's they make it really enticing to quit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're just 100% right and good, because the guys, once you start going down that road of quitting on yourself, you give up on a dream, you realize it's easy and you can do it again.
Well, it sounds like similar situation for you than it was for me, where when somebody quit, it's not that you necessarily want people to quit, but it also like fuels your fire, because you're like, there's one more that isn't me. And you're like, okay, this was enough to make you quit, but it wasn't enough to make me quit. And for whatever reason, that would energize me a little bit. And it actually turned into sort of a motivating factor. So I didn't necessarily mind when people were quitting.
I didn't either. It's the thing I liked, especially I joined, I still 5'6". I thought I was 5'8" until I went down to the Army, told me that they don't stack shit that high. You're only 5'6", son. I was 5'6", 108-pound cross-country runner when I started. And all the bigger guys that just told me why they could make it and I wasn't going to,
Yep.
just watching them cry, it did fuel the fire. Tough is entirely within your own control. And I figured that part out. Like, I'm not going to be the fastest. I'm not going to be the strongest, but I can be the toughest.
Yep.
And just own it.
I think that's something people don't realize, like how much toughness is also a decision, right? Like you have to decide to endure on a consistent basis.
The thing that, for me, it always ended up coming down to the throwing your rucksack back on to keep marching. And it was there's a million ways to get up with the heavy rucksack on. But the coolest looking one is you kind of stand behind it with your arms crossed in front, just basically throw it over your head and just march off. And I remembered thinking that, like, that's the right way to do it, because nobody else has to see how hard that is for you. And if I can do that, I can remember that they can't break me. I can make it. And going beyond the kind of weed out programs, if I can remember to stand up and act like this doesn't matter and they can't break me, then I can make my guys feel the same way about it.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, in the moment that they're in your head, or you're in your own head, maybe is a better way to put it, right? And then you're failing to put the ruck back on, you're failing to put one foot back in front of the other. That starts kind of a slippery slope.
Yeah. The other piece that I think it's probably common in almost all military training, because there's a lot of running, was that I remember going on these miserable runs, I think even far back as basic training. And there's the fallout truck, right? You can give up and then end up on the truck. You know, you're going to be in trouble, but there's some kind of punishment waiting. And on a lot of those runs, I remembered that feeling that, like, I don't know if I can do this, but I didn't want to know what happened when I got on the truck. Like, I don't know how to quit, and I don't want to find out, right? I don't want to know what that is. So just keep going.
Yep. So a strange segue, but kind of a necessary one, I guess. If we're talking about rucksacks are a little harder to carry if we only have one strap. What are you willing to share about? I believe it's Objective Reindeer.
It
Is that correct?
was. So I guess it was June 11th of 2003. We like the symmetry because it was the 9/11 was kind of the inciting incident for most of us. And we got our tickets punched to go to the big show when the war broke out. So June 11th, 2003, we were in kind of northeastern Iraq. And we'd been largely tasked with chasing down that deck of cards they had of Saddam's regime. There were some cool missions in there, but there were also a lot of this was not terribly exciting. So they briefed a lot of these. We're going to hit terrorist training camp that ended up being nothing. The night that they set the op order out for Objective Reindeer, it sounded good on paper. It was supposed to be 70 to 100 terrorists training out in the Iraqi desert, and we were going out there to close with and destroy the enemy before they could do harm to coalition forces. The way they briefed it, the Air Force had the biggest piece of that show. They were dropping daisy cutters, JDAMs, everything you heard of. They were going to drop on this thing. And we joked that they said we're going to mop up. And we kind of thought, okay, where's our mop and bucket, right? There was an odd number of kind of unfamiliar high-ranking officers milling about during the op order, which was usually, I don't know about your experience, but in mine, like that was always a good sign that something exciting was going to happen.
Yeah.
Some general you've never seen before or colonel you've never met wishes you happy hunting before you get on the helicopter. You're like, oh, this is not a dry hole we're about to hit. I was carrying the radio for our company first sergeant, Pete Rothke, who I think later went on to be command sergeant major of the 2nd Ranger Battalion. He was my platoon sergeant when I was a brand new private and then came back as our first sergeant. So I knew him quite well. And we had our battalion PA, we had our company senior medic, and we had our supply sergeant as an extra rifleman on this particular mission. First Sergeant Rothko was referred to us as Team Band-Aid. We were the casualty collection point element. So I'm walking point for our group because I am the junior ranking guy at a corporal by like 2 pay grades. And it's fairly gnarly as we're flying in on the Chinook. I remember looking out and watching contrails from RPGs whizzing past and thinking, this is a much better fight than it anticipated getting in. The crew chief shouted guns tight, and then you hear the minigun whir up and start shooting. And this is going to be a pretty exciting objective. When the ramps dropped, it looked like something out of a war movie. I'd been in some fights by this point. Like we'd seen some stuff in Afghanistan and we'd seen some stuff in Iraq. And this topped all of it. It was beautiful Ranger chaos, right? Like everything you'd hope for as a child, thinking about the action adventure that will be your military service. As we disembarked the Chinook, I left a little bit of separation between our element and the squad from a different platoon that was in front of us. It had been a deliberate decision, but one of those things we always get kind of anxious getting off the bird, especially because it's like, all right, let's go. We got the mission's on. But I remember being grateful I did because I watched an RPG kind of fly between us and the guys in front of us. We started to pick our way into the low ground where we were going to establish our casualty collection point. And I'd had the radio tuned to the casualty collection net rather than the fire's net, and saw my mistake when the little bird kind of came over the top of us and did a rocket run. And you could feel the heat from the explosions. And that was kind of gnarly. I'd seen them shoot things before, but had never been so close where it was like, oh, that's a little too hot. I may have made a error in judgment on which way we're going to get down to low ground. Give a signal, we turn around, and one of the things I remember being told anecdotally is that the radio is kind of the giant kick me sign on the battlefield, and it's everybody seems to think you're important, so you're the target. And this thing was in full effect. It was one of these heavy satellite radios that comes with its own kind of man-portable little satellite array, so you can use that technology, but mostly it's got various antennas that say, hey, shoot at me. It's working overdrive this night, and I'd pick a different draw to walk us down, and we're taking a lot of fire, but we have a lot of different Ranger elements moving on the objective, so I can't shoot back, which is really nerve-wracking. I'm sure you've got your own experiences with this sort of thing, but it's when you can shoot back and close with and destroy the enemy, there's something fair about that, I guess, is at least it satisfied my sense of equity. here we're taking fire, and I can kind of see some muzzle flashes off in the distance, but I can't really ID a target. And it felt like it would be reckless to start shooting back. I hate it. The fire's getting more and more effective, and I'm looking a couple 100 meters away across this wadi system with elephant grass in the low ground, and the rounds start to change. They start to hear that snap as they get closer and closer, and you're getting little puffs of dirt, and we're getting that whizzing noise where it's ricocheted off a rock, and it's like, this is really effective fire incoming, but I still can't really ID what I'm going to shoot at. And memory's a funny thing. So I doubt that my recollection that there was tracer in the final burst that these guys fired us is true. But what I remember was that it seemed like the round went between me and our battalion physician's assistant. Sorry, my dogs have decided to right now make the...
Yeah, they want in on the story.
Hey, guys, sorry, I'm telling a story here. So the round goes between me and our physician's assistant, and then the next one takes my rucksack strap right off my shoulder. I felt the weight shift and looked down, and the guys shooting at us are practically at my feet.
Holy cow.
I think they were as surprised as I was that they missed, because I remember vividly watching the guy lower his AK just a fraction so that he could kind of see what happened. And I was just faster than they were. I snapped a couple of rounds off at him and his buddy, and that was the last mistake they ever made. The next day, we had left a platoon out there that took in site exploitation photos, and I got both of them right in the forehead. A couple other of the guys in our group returned fire at that moment, and we got rid of them. But I was short a rucksack strap and didn't realize how badly bruised my shoulder was until the next day. The body armor had saved me, or maybe the rucksack strap bled off just enough momentum from the AK round that it took care of the inertia so that when it hit the ceramic plate, it didn't go through the second layer of Kevlar.
So a funny, also not funny question to ask, but I have to, because this is who we are. Is it more annoying to be shot or more annoying to be an RTO with a heavy ass ruck and only have one strap? Like which one genuinely bothered you more at the time?
Honestly, it was I'm down to one rucksack strap, because it was the instant relief on these guys shot at me. How dare they? Because they didn't get away with it. It wasn't like they got clean. We didn't have much of a chance to think about it, because about that moment, I got a call that one of our guys had his leg blown off with an RPG, and we were racing to set up a casualty collection point because now we're late. We made our way down into the elephant grass. I'm down to one rucksack strap, and it was fairly miserable. The elephant grass is pretty gnarly stuff. It felt like everything in there was exploding. RPGs, conventional grenades, everything's shooting at us. You can't see anything. And somehow the elephant grass seemed to absorb it. I remember feeling concussions that didn't do much damage, other than the next day there's some strange holes in my uniform. But we had to make it back to the high ground. We raced to where Mount Waters was being treated, and ultimately I got to make the call to bring in the casualty collection bird. So we medevaced Waters off the battlefield, and the rest of the good part of the story is his.
I remember when I came back in, so this is probably about 3-4 years after that, and exiting at a club in Tacoma or something of the sort, a bar in Tacoma, and under some precarious conditions, we'll just say, and coming face to face with a uniformed Matt Waters as a Tacoma cop, and him just kind of giving us that look and us giving him that look, and we just went about our way, and he let us.
He's a great dude. He was a tab spec 4. So in the way the Ranger Regiment works, I know you know this, but I guess for the benefit of your audience, is that when you get to the Ranger Regiment, you're a private and you're treated as kind of, you're there to learn the job until you go to Ranger school, and then you come back with your Ranger tab, you're promoted to specialist, and then you're kind of being groomed as a junior leader within the regiment. So when I got there, Matt Waters already had his Ranger tab. So he could tell us what to do when we did push-ups, but he was a good guy and was one of those people who's always kind of quick to, with a smile, a joke. You might have to do push-ups, but he gave you good advice. And so it was rather traumatic when you're out on a battlefield and your buddy's hurt. So it was a rough night.
Without a doubt, I'm definitely glad that in the long run, a good leader stayed alive and still able to live probably what I hope was an awesome life. Seemed like he was doing well anytime I saw him, but I didn't know him personally.
Last I got to see him was out in the world doing a podcast talking about that night, and it seemed like he was doing pretty well. So I'm glad to hear it. Hopefully he sees this and reaches out.
So from going from being, kind of bottom of the food chain, I guess, as a, Ranger private up to being a tab corporal, which it's hard to explain to people too, the weight of having those hard bars. Like there is a big differentiation between a tab E4 corporal and specialist. At least I felt like there was back then. I will say when I came back in later, it was a little more watered down. But from segueing from that time in service and then out into quote the real world, right? And I guess what is law the first place you went to? What steered you in that direction? What did it feel like to be kind of back in square one?
It was a hard transition. So when I got out, I had no college experience prior to joining the Army. And so I got out and I went to undergrad and I picked something I loved. So I did marine biology for undergrad and got a minor in chemistry. There were field trips in every class. There's a lot of scuba diving. It was amazing. And
That's so Southern California of you.
it was great. And it was the perfect place to do it.
Hell yeah.
I got certified as a research diver, which meant I could get paid to scuba dive on all the grad student projects because they needed to hire divers to do work for them. And this was just fantastic. Then my wife realized that she didn't want to be poor or live on a boat. And that's kind of what you get to do if you're a marine biologist for a living. So I went to law school and it was very similar to me joining the Army. This was, okay, this is a path forward, but I don't really know anything about it. And it was a very odd experience. I felt, especially when I started college, I remember feeling very disconnected because all of my high school friends that had gone to college had kind of moved on, and I felt like I couldn't relate to them. And all of my Ranger buddies were thousands of miles away at best, if not across the world fighting. And that was a challenge for me. And even more so than I'm back as the new guy in school. Mostly I kind of adopted the same gray man persona that it helps so well in the Ranger Regiment. And I think that it almost selects for you. You don't bring attention to yourself. You quietly do a really great job at being kind of the everyman. What I found in the civilian world was that losing that connection to my friends, I could fill it with volunteerism. So pretty early, I started finding ways to look for the community to give back to. And some of the veteran stuff, the early edge of it was starting to spin up. So I was graced with the fact that my wife is much smarter than I am, better at finding these opportunities than I have ever been. So she found a lot of things for me to dedicate some time to. Eventually I managed to build back kind of my friend network and that made it a lot easier. I imagine it still is hard.
Are there still any, because now you also have fatherhood happening. Obviously, you're also running your own business. Is there any opportunity still for volunteerism in your current life?
There is. I got lucky and kind of fell into some opportunities within our kind of local community. The city of Long Beach about 10 years ago stood up a veterans commission for the city. So it's an advisory board to give city council and the mayor recommendations on things to make the lives of veterans in the community better. What was nice is that it was a small enough commitment. It was, a few hours a week and more hours every month, but it was an opportunity to stay involved and to find other things out there. And as it stands, I've termed out as a veterans commissioner. The city charter only allows for 8 years, but I get to volunteer at a couple local organizations. We have a American Gold Star Manor, which is connected with the American Gold Star Mothers charity. Originally, it was a property dedicated to housing Gold Star families. Nowadays, we support senior low incomes and senior veterans who need a place to live, and I serve on that board. And the other board I get a chance to serve on is the Long Beach Area Veterans Collaborative. We are a nonprofit geared at helping other veteran nonprofits connect with volunteers and resources that they need, because we've found that the veteran support community tends to be quite siloed. If you do housing, you know a lot about housing, but very little about helping people find jobs or find opportunities for education, and vice versa. And we try to be the liaison between those things.
Yeah, I think that's great because I think a lot of those, veteran nonprofits are either worried about, I guess, competing maybe, or they want to collaborate, but they don't necessarily know where to start. So I know for myself and working with, and I still work with Soldiers to Sidelines. And, there's times where another entity might kind of look and smell like us a little bit, and you're, circling each other, sniffing each other's butts, but you quickly realize, one, there's never too much help to go around, right? And so there's a mission for both of us, and we're going to be a lot stronger. We're going to help a lot more people if we actually collaborate on that initiative versus look at each other as competitors and then continue to operate within our silos, which are inherently limited.
It's been a real challenge, and it's kind of funny because I think that your perspective on this is a great one, and it's not unique. I feel like so many of us think about similar veteran organizations that way and do have this conflicted, right? It's competitive, but we do this better. But I'd really like to work with these guys. And the nice part when you start working with other veteran groups is that at the end of the day, among the veteran community, we all know that these are all people who, when asked, put the right hand up and volunteered to potentially give up their lives for our country. It's a lot of common ground, and it's a good starting place.
It's a little strange because you know as well as I do in the halls of Battalion, right? There's your squad, and like your squad reigns supreme. But the moment that you step into another floor of the same building, now you represent your platoon. Then when you step out into the courtyard, you represent your company. And then when you go down to pre-ranger, for example, you represent your battalion. Now when you go from pre-ranger to ranger school, you represent the
The
regiment at
regiment.
large. And so when we step out into the civilian world, as veterans, we represent the military at large. And so it's like your kind of potential circle has to keep growing, because if we only, continue to hang with the folks that we knew from the hallway, back in the barracks, we're going to have a very, very small, if not invisible friend group. And so I think it's essential to broaden our perspective a little bit, start to appreciate more what other veterans outside of the regiment did and what they can do out in the civilian world and create those bonds.
It's been some of the most rewarding experience of my kind of post-service career is getting out here, meeting other veterans, and finding ways to connect. The thing that I can't remember where I actually heard this, if it was school or what, but they talk about how difficult it is to make friends as an adult, right? Once you're out in the workforce, if you don't happen to like the people you work with, your opportunities are very limited. And I think that to some degree that's true, but it's only as true as you really want it to be. When you go out looking to be a friend, I think you find that you can make a lot of friends. And if you surround yourself with veterans, there are a lot of opportunities to find common ground out there. And it's been super rewarding. I've made a lot of great friends as adults. I'm glad we met doing this kind of stuff and through mutual connections.
I was literally just thinking the same thing of how glad I am that James connected us. I feel like you and I were fast friends, and we had a phone call, and it was one of those that like suddenly it's an hour. I think I was walking during that call, and I got in like I don't even know, several miles out on the track in the middle of the winter just because I didn't really want the call to end, and that would
That
have
call
never
made my
happened.
day. I was in the backyard just puttering around and chatting with you. It was great. It was all the things I loved about the downtime in the Ranger Regiment, right? It's just that there's something about the people who were willing to volunteer to have those same kind of experiences that make you line up.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's the people, and I know that was a common theme in my conversation with James too, right? Like sometimes the hardest thing for us is to find those people, and like you just spoke to, part of it is you have to be out there looking to make friends, and you have to be willing to open up your social circle a little bit. They're not assigned to you like they are in the military, right? Like you're not just going to be crammed in a cattle car and suddenly you got to figure it out, and friendship is a part of survival. So instead, it has to be something that is a little bit more intentional.
It's been good, and the best luck I've had with it is trying to keep in mind if you show up someplace and your attitude is how can I help and what can I do for you? It's amazing how easy it becomes to make friends when you approach it that way and you look for people who are willing to do the same.
Without a doubt. I will admit, for a while, I was somebody who felt like I was trying so hard to keep up from a professional standpoint that I thought I don't have anything or the time to give to friendships, and I need to take, to like consume to keep myself going. And the moment I realized that that's not really the way it works, like life became a lot easier, a little bit looser, and like, okay, you actually have to give without an agenda for the sake of giving or from genuine care, concern, whatever it is, passion, purpose. And that's when things just inherently start falling into place.
I couldn't agree more. There are a lot of books that I will read and reread because they're good reminders. And one of the ones I always go back to at least a couple of times a year is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, written in the 1930s, I think. And so there's nothing in there that will shock anyone when you read it. But it is a series of good reminders about how to communicate with others and how to try to help people kind of improve their life and in doing so improve yours. And it really was a challenge when I first got out, right? It was I didn't know how to connect. I wasn't sure I wanted to. I didn't want to make civilian friends. I miss the friends I've made in the regiment. You get very, I think I keep going back to the word, but silo, right? It's this is my tribe, right? These are my people, and only these are my people. And then I realized that it's too narrow an ambit. And if I start just being me and trying to be helpful and do the things that made me a good ranger, the opportunities are boundless. And with the volunteerism, you have as much time as you're willing to make for this stuff. Have never been great at sleeping. Yeah, I know it's important, and most of us don't do enough of it. But I've got the hours, and I enjoy the way I feel when I get that sense that I'm giving back or I'm doing something helpful.
So you bring up a good point about not sleeping, which reminds me of the fact that you're kind of the first guest right now who's not somebody I met through this human performance side of the house, right? So even James, him and I do have also a professional connection. And what's funny is even though we were both at Battalion together, really I got to know him as a coach at First Group. And so again, in that human performance setting. And, that said, when you and I first talked, one thing I remember was some of your experience, with that initial law firm and a little bit of kind of moving through that hierarchy and some of the stress that involved, and then kind of what you've done, one, in terms of life decisions to help mitigate or reduce some of that stress. And then also, you have some unique circumstances that limit some of your fitness, but you still lean into some of what you can do. So if you wouldn't mind kind of walking us through a little bit of that.
Sure. I was one of those guys, and I imagine I'm not entirely unique. Some of us get into the fitness route like you did. Some of us, the only shape we get into after we leave the military is round. And so I went the latter. I think the heaviest I ever was at my wedding, which is oddly beneficial. So I joke that most of the time I'm ambiguously fat. I may be more or less fat than I was the last time people saw me, but they're not sure. So I get oh, you look good. They don't know if my weight's going up or down. I don't know if my weight's going up or down. If I was the fattest in my life at my wedding, if that was the last time I saw them, they're like, "Oh, you did better. That's good." Being a young lawyer and not being already kind of committed to keeping up with the fitness stuff, I had a little bit of help. So when I got out, back pain was bad. I had a couple of instances while we were serving where some not great adventures kind of resulted in some fairly significant back and hip pain. Gain weight and it gets worse and more painful. I did all the conservative treatment I could find, including some stuff that I was willing to be open-minded about, but seemed a little bit like voodoo to me. And then ultimately got talked into the surgical approach with a negative result. So I've had a disc replacement and then ultimately a fusion, when after the disc replacement, they seemed to have missed that the pars were fractured on both sides of the vertebrae that they replaced. And it didn't get better. So that became a great reason not to be as athletic as I used to be. Weight increases. I didn't exercise much. And then skip ahead to a few years ago. All of a sudden, I was finding that I was having what I initially thought was really bad acid reflux that was resistant to all the things that had worked in the past, the Tums or Prilosec or the other over-the-counter remedies. And I saw a doctor about it who said I had to go in the middle of the evening and get an EKG because he couldn't rule out unstable angina. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, I'm worried you might be having a heart." Save some of the details of the learning about this experience, but my right coronary artery was 100% blocked. And I have now had, I think, 8 different angioplasties, and my right coronary artery is full metal jacketed, which means I have titanium stents from one end to the other and still some ongoing issues. So my heart rate's fairly limited. Once I get into about 110 beats per minute, I start having some pretty significant pain, and it changes the way I can exercise. Once upon a time, exercise was my stress relief and probably the only stress relief I had. And in the spirit of something had to give, I was grateful when circumstances ultimately meant that the thing that changed was my approach to my career. So I'd been at a mid-sized law firm with about 100 lawyers spread nationwide, was having significant problems with my partners, and ultimately got voted off the island and am now running a solo practice that I enjoy much, much more. And I found that taking the stress down has probably increased my longevity rather significantly. I had a couple of heart attacks in there that still show up on the EKG, and hopefully no more down the road, but all you can do is all you can do.
That's true. And by the way, I love that you said all you can do is all you can do, because this is one of my, it's probably just words, right? At the end of the day, but I'm a little bit bullish about the difference between all you can do is all you can do and it is what it is, because my thought is it is what it is lacks agency, lacks ownership, and just that subtle change of words of like all you can do at least means there is something that you can do, right? And I think we always talk about in this on the fitness side of the house, it's like recovery, there is no adaptation without recovery, blah, blah, blah. One, I love to say there's no adaptation without stress to actually adapt to, but we're always looking at what's another way to recover. Like, oh, I need, to sleep, to eat, the supplement, I don't know, the sauna, whatever it is. And a lot of times what we don't look at is the stress, like one, the type of stress we're placing on the body and the mind and everything else. Two, the degree of it, right? And so like for you, it was addition by subtraction. So, hey, I actually need to reduce some of this stress load. It's not like I need to go do one more thing. You literally can't add exercise, at least at the intensity you want to, into the mix. So instead we have to have, a reduction somewhere else. So I love that there is sort of this addition by subtraction in your story that moves you in the right direction, but also the fact that you just casually dropped that there were 2 heart attacks along the way. So far, if I'm counting right, we've got shot once and 2 heart attacks.
I'm catching Rasputin, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. We were informed while we were in Afghanistan that we had been poisoned, which was kind of an adventure. We had been working out of a CIA safe house, and after we'd rotated out, one of the other battalions had caught one of the local vendors who was bringing in, I don't know what, was cyaniding the shower. Luckily, we weren't drinking it, and it turns out it takes a much larger dose of cyanide to kill people when it's just the shower water. but we chalked up kind of the miscellaneous. Everybody thought it was just you're in a new country and everyone's sick, but
Yeah.
no, it was poisoned. So heart attacks, poisoned, shot.
What is it they say? It's the dose that makes the poison, right? So the dose was too low, so if anything, it actually made you stronger.
That's right. We got a minimal amount of resistance out of that to cyanide. If this were a role playing game, we got a +1 to that.
So to what do you attribute your resilience?
I think
Yeah, I was just gonna say because whether I feel like you're somebody who would hesitate to call it that, so I think I put you off guard even just using that word.
it's a
But
great word.
let's be real, you've had some experiences that could have easily killed you. They haven't. Not only that, you're still there's plenty of levity, in your story. So what do you feel? What can you attribute your resilience to?
I think part of it's just stubbornness, right? That it's the same thing that makes tough a decision. There's a limit to your physical abilities and your biology, but there's an element of I'm not going to quit. At least they can't make me, and I haven't found something that can make me yet. I So the heart attacks I had, I think the medical term is they're silent heart attacks. And they call them that because you don't dial 911 and you don't go in and seek immediate treatment for it. The instances where it occurred were fairly obvious when I think about it. And some of this was your decision making is a little bit impaired by the degree of the calamity before you. But so I woke up, I'd already been diagnosed with a right coronary artery blockage and was waiting to have an angioplasty to fix this. Some of the pain I'd been experiencing was pretty bad and had been getting progressively worse, including a lot of the classic heart attack symptoms or shortness of breath, radiating pain up through the jaw and down into the fingers. And I woke up in the middle of the night. My wife was a police dispatcher at the time, and my two little children are sleeping in the house. And I woke up and I realized I was in trouble. Like this pain was significantly worse than it had been. It was coupled with the shortness of breath. And I was reluctant to tell myself I'm having a heart attack, but it was pretty clear that something was wrong. So I text my wife to see if she could come home because in my head, it would be the worst thing possible for me to dial 911 and leave in an ambulance in the middle of the night with no one to watch my children who are now traumatized. Oh, dad's leaving us in the ambulance. So I text Jess, and she's the supervisor at the city's communication center, and she's the only one on duty. And I say, hey, can you come home? No details. I think I'd gotten yelled at if she'd gotten too much information. And she says, no, she's the only supervisor and there's no one who can come in and relieve her. Why? So "Well, it's just no big deal. I got it worked out. Sorry." So I raided my hiking first aid kit because it actually had aspirin in it. And I remembered hearing that aspirin worked as a blood thinner. So I chewed a couple of those. And through all of the experiences with the back pain stuff, the shower, oddly, is one of those places where I feel like it hurts less. And I swear this probably goes back to serving in the Ranger Regiment, where the only thing you look forward to when things are truly miserable is getting in a hot shower.
Oh my gosh, yes.
The relief is palpable. That's what I did. I got in the shower and ran the hot water completely out and waited for the symptoms to abate and just kind of held on. Like, I guess it's a white knuckle approach to surviving a heart attack, but I wasn't willing to just give up and to roll over and die, but I also wasn't willing to call 911, which probably would have resulted in a different kind of me saving my own life. But
That's a
it was my approach.
dual-headed stubbornness right there.
It works. And somewhere along the way, I got told that with my problems I was having, that I wouldn't be here in 6 months, but that was about 3 years ago. So far they've been wrong, and I will hope they continue to. I found a cardiologist who says I'll live to be 100. I like him. He's fantastic.
Yeah,
And,
we want him on the team.
he seems great, right? Like you got to find a guy who says, no, what you're doing is good. Just keep with it and just don't die.
Yeah. Hey, the placebo and nocebo are both very real.
Both valid.
Yep. Yeah. Believing you're going to continue on is definitely part of the recipe, I think, for longevity.
So it comes down to not giving up, right?
Yeah.
You can handle as much as you're willing to handle, and no one has to see how hard this is for you. The experience you're having is on the inside, and while I'm not advocating not asking for help when you need it, I think there's an element of I can take this, bring it on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even when we do ask for help, it doesn't mean we're not still having to hold some of the reins, right? Like we can. I say this often: you can't outsource responsibility. You can only outsource expertise, right? And so, similar. Like at the end of the day, it's up to you. Your decisions, your lifestyle, your mindset is going to determine, the years in your life and the life in your years. And then you can also go ahead and bring in some expertise to help you, tweak some of that along the way.
The help is invaluable, but at the end of the day, you're the one who has to do the work.
Dude, that's on the daily right now. I have a lot of consults with folks, a lot of wellness consults. And I'm going to get a poster on the wall at some point, but I've started pointing to an imaginary poster and I say, this meeting accomplished nothing. It's everything that you actually do when you leave this room is what's going to determine your fate when it comes to health, when it comes to performance, whatever else it is.
The nice part with so much of that is it's something you can control. There's as much time as you're willing to make for the things you're willing to make time for. The volunteerism is the same sort of thing. Get busy, we all get busy, and work kind of becomes all consuming when you let it. But there are more hours, and there's a lot to be said for taking time off for self-care and for whatever it is that you do to relax. You can use volunteerism as a way to relax, at least I have. It's not always the easiest approach to it, right? There's work involved, but uh, if it's rewarding, it's rewarding. I don't know. I feel like I get more out of that than watching one more episode of a TV show.
Well, I think there's different kinds of energy, right? So you can lend your labor, you can lend your you know, mental fortitude or your intelligence to something, whatever it is. Like you can labor and you can spend energy in one way in this volunteer capacity, but you're also getting an ROI and you're getting energy somewhere else, right? So maybe that's a spiritual component, right? So maybe emotionally, maybe spiritually, maybe our soul is being fulfilled in the process. And so it's not a one-way energy street, even if you're putting the labor in one direction, even if you're using your mind kind of in one direction, there is an ROI there, even if that's not what initially drives you.
I couldn't agree more. Some of the most rewarding experiences I've had and the most fulfilling are started with the, hey, how can I help? Which is always one of my favorite questions to be able to ask in almost any scenario. I'm luckily blessed that I get to do that professionally a lot of the time. That's how my client meetings start. I've been told here's a problem. So and so needs to talk to you. Great. And I start with how can I help? I try the same thing with most of the volunteerism stuff. You get to meet a lot of people and there's usually something you can do for them. And what I found is that even when it's not just that I get the benefit of having helped them, that's a wonderful return on investment. The So often, there's something they can do for me, and that's kind of what friendships are made of, right? You get some benefit you didn't expect in the bargain, and if I get nothing else, I got the opportunity to help somebody who I got to meet and make their day a little bit better.
Man, I absolutely love that. And Ryan, no surprise that this has been an awesome conversation and that I hate that it has to end, but I guess we do have to close it up at some point. That said, you probably know it's coming because I don't, you listen to a couple of the other episodes, but I would love if you wouldn't mind kind of just sharing one last bit of advice for any of the veteran community that's listening. And actually, I might even charge you to say maybe two pieces of advice, one more general to the world and maybe one legal.
Okay. So I think my general piece of advice to the world is that we get very caught up in what's happening and our perspective and the need to share our feelings about everything, especially in today's world where we all have that pocket podium that lets us get on the bully pulpit and share everything. I think what this leads to is you see a lot of really poor communication techniques, and the old adage that you have two ears and one mouth for a reason is still important. Most of the time I've found that I get a lot more benefit by holding my tongue and listening first rather than rushing to a response, and using those good communication skills, I think makes me a better friend and a better lawyer and a better person. And I try to keep that in mind every day. That said, the legal piece of advice I give, because I always like this one when I've heard it, is that if you're ever in legal trouble on the criminal side, shut up. Keep your mouth shut, exercise your right to counsel, and close your mouth. It will save you a lot of grief, and it goes with the theme. Uh, let your lawyer talk for you, or at least give you advice before you start talking.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And hopefully this podcast is never subpoenaed for any reason. And
Protected, right? We have a lot of folks listening in. I could kind of pretend that there's some kind of privilege in there. It wouldn't hold water, but it doesn't stop me from stomping my feet and waving it around.
hey,
Thank you for having me on. This was great.
thank you. I appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure.